Peter Egan's first major TV role was in the 1968 BBC adaptation of Cold Comfort Farm, which would help him carve out a niche in smarmy characters.
Aye, women's nonsense. Women be all alike. Fussing with their fal-lals and bedazing a man's eyes.
Another graduate of RADA, his background was mainly classical theatre and period TV dramas, such as the character of Oscar Wilde in the miniseries Lily in 1978 and Prince Regent in '79. Peter Egan, like Penelope Wilton, had also worked with Richard Briers on the stage, this time in George Bernard Shaw's Arms and the Man.
My agent rang me up and said, do you fancy doing a comedy series for the BBC? And I said, well, I've never done any comedy because I was always doing kind of period stuff, you know, like the Prince Regent or Oscar Wilde, stuff like that.
Long live His Majesty King Charles I!
So I said, Richard Briers is in it, and they said yes, and so I said, OK, I'll do it.
The great thing is to get actors from the stage, I think, especially with sitcom, because they're used to audiences and they're used to interacting with others. And the great thing about comedy is the way you react to the other person. Now I look back and think, my God, this is a very good double act. This little kind of ratty man and this wonderful 6'2", wonderful man. Hello, Martin, you know.
Hello, Martin.
It's situation comedy. I think it's one of the hardest things to do. It forces you to use yourself a lot, which is very, very good for modern acting as opposed to period acting. So you learn an awful lot about acting by doing it.
Stop that. Just stop it.
Martin, could you be masterful without shaking?
It's wonderful to goad somebody who you know you're going to get a reaction from, and it worked every time.
This is the life, eh, Martin? Busy doing nothing.
You need good actors to do lightweight stuff. This very sort of thin ice stuff can go out of the window, can be lost, unless you've got people who really know their technique and craft. So we got, you know, very high standard there, as we did in The Good Life.
Two of the more memorable characters in the series were Howard and Hilde Hughes, naive, infuriating and a little bit odd.
I'm becoming terrified that I'm being touched by dark forces.
Both Geraldine Newman and Stanley Labore came from the theatre and had small parts in a number of TV series such as Dr. Finley's Casebook and The Naked Civil Servant. But their big break came when they were offered the parts of devoted couple Howard and Hilde.
Howard and Hilde were amazing because they were both mad.
Howard and Hilde were part of a world that Martin could control before Paul had come along and disrupted it.
Howard, a simple man, an enthusiast.
I used to think that a jacuzzi was a little hopping animal, you know.
Howard is a kind of disciple to Martin. He sort of will do whatever Martin asks him to do, and Hilde tags along.
Howard and Hilde, you really are a couple of funny old buckets.
They're the sort of couple who, in real life, you probably find deeply frustrating.
They also wore exactly the same clothes. They both was like twins.
But it's not always pleasant when someone comes up to you and says, oh, I love your matching costumes, and you think, what about my acting?
Yes.
My
yes.
costumes.
The only thing I think I put to them was that I said, you ought to be wearing the same clothes somehow or other.
We talked about this before, didn't we? And Geraldine thinks that it was her idea.
That it was my idea. But it may have been, I may have just thought of it at the same time.
With the cast now in place, there was still one important ingredient missing for a hit series, an attention-grabbing title. May I have a seconder? He does try. Yours in haste.
Titles are always terribly difficult, terribly difficult. We went through something like 39 titles. E equals MC squared was one of them. I can't tell you the trouble we had.
Ever-decreasing circles. After much head-scratching, the writers settled on the cryptic ever-decreasing circles, a canny reference to Martin's tendency to disappear into his own anal little world.
The competition between Martin and Peter's part was that Egan's part was good at everything. He was what they called at school an all-rounder. He would be very good at mathematics, he'd be very good at football, be very good at cricket. My favourite episode was the cricket match.
It was only during filming they discovered a potential problem in that Peter Egan, unlike his character, couldn't actually play cricket.
Sidney Lotterby, he was terribly worried. And he said, he can't play cricket, he's no good. He can't play cricket. And we thought, I said, well, can't you do some magic with the camera? I mean, can't you do something? And then somebody said, you know, put some music on the top. Which was wonderful. They were this great man doing these great, whoa, you know, and it looked like wonderful. It looked like a great batsman. And it worked a treat.
But for Martin, it was his worst nightmare.
It was like cutting him through with a knife. He, the captain, he, the man who varnished the stumps, and his wife, trying to make it all right for him, said, look, never mind, you're good at playing the piano. You go in next door to the bar and give us a tune on the piano. You've always been good at that. They like that. You know they do. And he says, yes, I am good at that. And at that very moment, through the door, you hear da-dun, da-dun, dun, dun.
Yes, it is him.
The question that was also asked an awful lot was about the relationship between Paul and Anne, Martin's wife, and, you know, because there was always a teasing kind of relationship.
Yeah, take your time, take your time.
It's a sort of odd situation. There's a single man, and then sometimes he's rather flirty with me, and then you wonder whether I'll go off with... So there was a constant sort of interest in that area.
And I seem to remember somewhere that in the first series there was a final episode where Paul and Anne actually eloped together. And, of course, by the time we got to the fourth episode of the first series, they realised that would be a total disaster, so it was never made. But so that kind of underlying tease was always kind of threaded through the whole series.
One of these days, I'm going to call your bluff.
Who's bluffing?
Slightly disappointing audiences of around 5 million watched the first series of Ever Decreasing Circles. The BBC would have expected more, but they were willing to give the series every possible chance of success.
They decided to go for a second series, so they repeated the first series again, and the repeats of the first series got 7 million, which is also quite remarkable, because then the people who had seen the first series talked about it, and more people watched the second series. The second series itself got 9 million. Anybody ever got 147 here? And then it went from 9 million to 11 million to 13, 7, and it was just fantastic, just wonderful.
When they returned for Series 3, there had been an unexpected change in personnel. Director Sidney Lotterby had left.
I don't know why Sidney left. I don't know.
I left because I was given a sack. I was called into the office one day out of the blue and told that I wasn't giving enough direction to our principal actor. It hurt at the time, but there we are.
Sidney had been replaced by Harold Snowd, another of the BBC's most prolific and reliable comedy directors.
Sidney, I always thought by nature, was an introvert, which is rather funny considering the amount of wonderful comedy he's produced, and Harold is an extrovert. And so it was just a basic change of energy, I think.
Harold's first major sitcom was Oh Brother, starring Derek Nimmo in 1968. The following year he directed Dad's Army, before moving on to Are You Being Served? In 1978, Harold worked with writer Richard Waring on the series Rings on Their Fingers, then helped the Doctor's sitcom Don't Wait Up continue its smooth run through the 80s. He brought his experience and energy to an increasingly popular show.
My favourite was when Martin has to go to Belgium, to Bruges, to attend a conference, and a colleague of his does the dirty on him in as much as he encourages him to get drunk. He then gets a sort of local good time girl to come into Martin's bedroom.
Esmonde and Larbey, teamed with Briers, had once again struck gold with their delicate balance of dark humour and farce, where the comedy was more in the characters than the situation.
Well, a good sitcom should be about people who you know, people that you met, people that you work with. Recognisable people. People used to say in Ever Decreasing Circles, I love you in Martin Briers because I've got an uncle like that. I like Martin Briers because I've got one in the office, drives us mad.
You know, Howard, there are some people who would laugh if they could see us now.
Why? We don't look particularly silly, do we?
No, but they think we do. Well, people like those so-called alternative comedians. Les Dawson, that crowd.
By 1987 and the end of the fourth series, the comedy landscape was undergoing a transformation. Alternative comedians were elbowing their way in. Sofa-driven sitcoms like Ever-Decreasing Circles just weren't fashionable. When the fourth series ended, everyone moved on to their separate projects, and it looked like the end of Ever-Decreasing Circles. Esmonde and Larbey had already been enjoying success with Brushstrokes. Peter Egan co-starred in the BBC sitcom Joint Account with Hannah Gordon. And Richard Briers returned to the theatre, as well as indulging his taste for villainy in Doctor Who. But such was the lasting popularity of Ever-Decreasing Circles that in 1989 it was brought back for a one-off Christmas Eve special. It was an episode which saw major changes ahead for the Brices, because the normally super careful Martin somehow managed to get Anne pregnant.
Oh, Anne.
He'd heard that his firm was relocating and he had to move away from his friends and his house. And there were a lot of, you know, very emotional moments in it as well.
So, after 27 episodes, it was an emotional goodbye to the close, but not to the cast. After Ever-Decreasing Circles, Esmonde and Larbey continued the run of Brushstrokes, produced at times by both Harold Snowd and Sidney Lotterby, the best of both worlds. Snowd then took charge of keeping up appearances, while Lotterby worked with Bob Larbey again on As Time Goes By. The last series that Esmonde and Larbey wrote together for Briers was an anticlimax, as Down to Earth ran for just 7 episodes.
Gave me a bit of a scare there.
Peter Egan mixed theatre with television and film, and in 2000 made a not altogether successful return to sitcom with Cry Wolf, but returned to TV comedy with Home Again. Geraldine Newman returned to the theatre, as did Stanley Lebore, who also appeared alongside Penelope Wilton in the children's classic The Borrowers. Penelope Wilton recently popped up as Simon Pegg's mum in the movie Shaun of the Dead, which established a new genre, the zombie romantic comedy, or zom-rom-com.
I'm sorry, Mum.
After Down to Earth, Richard got himself going again with a number of critically acclaimed performances, and exhibited a darker side to his acting talents in an episode of Inspector Morse. In 2000, he returned to our television screens to delight audiences as the eccentric Hector in Monarch of the Glen.
Monarch of the Glen turned up, and I thought it was a very nice script, a wonderful part. The character part, I thought, oh, I can pinch the scenes here. It's a scene-stealing part, which I rather like at my age now.
No one can teach you timing. It's just something you have or you haven't. And Richard has it in spades.
He knows it all. He knows every nuance of comedy.
Richard Briers is absolutely superb at it. He's wonderful and a great joy to work with.
The quality of Richard Briers' unique performance as Martin Briers is one of the many elements that makes Ever-Decreasing Circles a classic and well-remembered sitcom.
I'm going to do something now, mate.
Wonderful scripts, wonderful directors, a terrific cast. It just worked.
And even though Richard Briers has left the young sitcom leads behind him, he hasn't ruled out a comeback if the right role comes along.
Yes, I would go back, and I'd like to be an old cantankerous grandpa. Not a lot to say, but all the best lines. That would suit me fine.
This sort of thing requires a bedrock, Martin. You are one.
That's very nice of you to say so.
Thank you, Martin.
That's quite all right, Howard.
And a big thank you from me, Martin.